Welcome to Not Just Money with your hosts, Doretta and Lee. This isn't your typical podcast about finances. It's a podcast about all the money conversations we aren't having, sometimes not even with ourselves. Join us on this journey of hard truths, lived experience, and the wisdom that comes from both. Because money is never just about money.
Hey, Lee.
Hi, are you ready for this one? Because I have a feeling it's going to be a bit of an interesting journey. What was it you called it? The performing self?
Close. The performative self,
Which is?
which is one of the rabbit holes I went down a couple weeks ago when I was preparing for our episode on shame. But it's also something that we've been circling around indirectly in quite a few of our earlier episodes. It's there in our discussions on values, on needs versus wants, and in our exploration of social media and how we get seduced into spending to impress and to improve our own ordinary, boring lives. It's even there in the predictable irrationality that behavioral economists think they discovered when it comes to how we human beings actually make decisions about money.
That's a lot. So, what is it exactly? The performative self for those who are uninitiated.
It's I guess you'd call it a theory of self. So when we're thinking about who we are, like in capital letters, who is my true self? It's complicated. The theory of the
Uh-huh.
performative self is that we aren't a single unchanging kind of authentic self, a kind of, essential spirit or soul or whatever. It observes that real life's kind of like a theater, and we actually perform different versions of ourselves for others, depending on the environment and who's there. Who are the others who see us? It's the idea that we perform ourselves for others and we perform differently for different people.
So, that's what we were talking about when we were exploring shame and guilt. That these emotions that evolved to make us part of our group, our community, that we needed to survive as social animals. So, what we choose to show or hide help us belong and maintain our social status.
Yeah, kind of. That's how I started down this particular rabbit hole. And, I'd never heard of performative self before either. But the thing is, it's not just about shame and guilt. It's more the idea that our self is quite complex and our identity is actually part performance. It's how we actively shape the self we present to others. So we have public selves and private selves, our professional work selves, our parental selves to our kids, our daughter or son selves to our parents, our friend self, our patient self, our student self, our teacher self, our consumer self, so many selves.
Yikes, that's a lot of selves.
And before all our listeners with psych degrees get too worked up, for the record, I know that the theory of the performative self has developed and morphed since it was first proposed back in the 50s, 60s, around there, especially when it comes to therapies. But it's still seminal. A lot of where we are today is based on that theory of performative self. At least that's how I interpreted it. So, as I understand it, psychology and sociology researchers today generally think that identity, the self, is really dynamic, a sort of constant interaction between and among our personal values, life experiences, biology, temperament, social context, cultural expectations, all that stuff. And we've talked about a lot of these things.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But I still think that the fundamental idea of the performative self, the idea that we perform ourselves and we edit and shape that performance as needed, I think that's still a really, really useful and relevant concept, especially in today's day of, social media and stuff. And it's actually an idea that goes back a long, long way. I mean, the 19th century philosopher William James, who's now considered the father of American psychology, said We've as many social selves as there are distinct groups of persons about whose opinions we care. And then there are the writers and the poets.
Oh gosh, here we go.
I am glaring at you.
Won't
Okay.
be the first time, won't be the last.
Walt Whitman, I am large, I contain multitudes. Or Fernando Pessoa,
Mhm.
each of us is several, is many, is a profusion of ourselves. I mean, when you think about it, it's even in the Bible. New Testament, I think it's Paul in one of those letters to the Corinthians or someone who says he has become all things to all people so that he can save their souls, something like that. So, my point is, it's a really useful way to think about how we act and make decisions in different situations. And I think it's especially useful when we think of some of the not so rational decisions we make about our money, our resources.
Okay, fine. I get the concept. Different places, different faces. And you've heard me say this many times, but I don't see myself as being different at all. I am always me. I make snarky jokes in all my circles. I am sarcastic. I am direct. I judge a lot. Okay, not in a mean spirited way, but in a seriously, what were you thinking kind of way. And being me in one version of me is important. It's also way less tiring. It's like lying. If you never lie, you never have to have a good memory. And I just don't have the energy or the bandwidth to be all things to all people. Sorry, Paul.
So, first of all, I've known you a long time, almost half your adult life. And I agree, I can attest that you are deeply committed to authenticity and deeply and consistently principled.
I feel like I know where this is going. Uh huh.
But, and I say this with love and respect, you absolutely do show up differently in different environments. We all do. I mean, I remember the first time you introduced me to your now husband. And when I got home, I said to my husband, well, there's a side of Lee I've never seen before.
Plausible deniability.
Look, I love watching you with your daughter or with your mom because, again, I see a different Lee. The Lee in the playground with her daughter shows up differently from the Lee who walks into the boardroom. The Lee who sits across the cafe table from me shows up differently from the Lee who addresses a room full of financial literacy volunteers. But they are all equally authentic Lees because there's no requirement and no assumption that the performative self be inauthentic. It absolutely can be authentic. It really, that's kind of tipping my hand on what I want to conclude about all this. But I think I can see it in a healthy way that the performative self is fully authentic, just curated, edited, focused in time and place and circumstance. And I think that's actually kind of where current thinking is on the self, that who we are contains both, authentic motivations and performative elements.
I guess it depends on what you mean by authentic.
Well, what do you mean by authentic?
Okay, so full disclosure. Doretta asked me this question a few days ago when we were discussing this topic before we recorded this episode. So I have had time to mull this over, so I don't want anybody to think that this is my immediate response to a very tough and complicated question. And honestly, I had a very deep existential moment over some instant noodles. Totally happened. Yes, Jordan's laughing at me. It's true, those moments can happen
That's,
at any time.
that's what
But
I'm
I had to,
for. That's what I'm for, to put you in deep existential moments over instant noodles.
but I had to ask myself, right? Is her calling me out accurate? And I think it really comes down to splitting hairs. As an example, I love my husband. I do not feel the same way about my colleagues. I mean, that would just be weird and uncomfortable for everyone. You know what I mean when I say I always show up as me? I mean, I don't pretend to be someone I'm not. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Um, to act or behave or lie in a way for me to fit into the group when the facts aren't true. Now, I have learned that pretending I am like the group I am with doesn't work for me. Now, do I act the same way with everyone? Well, no. I love to tell a good and appropriate joke or make some vague innuendo, but am I going to do that in a professional setting? No. Am I going to do that with my 5-year-old daughter? No. So I guess based on how Doretta has explained it, I would recalibrate my original answer to I show up as the most appropriate and interesting version of myself, audience dependent. Does that mean I contain multitudes? I still always see myself as one person. Like, I think I'm funny. I'm sure many would, argue with me on that point. But I might tell different jokes. Does that mean I am a different person? I am who I am. Okay, now Dread definitely rolling her eyes right now because I say that quite often, probably along with good talk, as we all know.
Look, that actually makes sense to me, and I really do think we are kind of hair splitting here. And again, I don't think there's any inherent conflict between authenticity and the concept of the performative self. In fact, I think it's healthy. I think about performing yourself with the same integrity, the same values. It's when you feel you have to present yourself differently in ways inconsistent with your own values that you get into trouble. And that happens all the time. You know where I think the confusion might come from?
Where?
Just semantics, the meaning of the word perform, and
Mm.
so of how we understand performative.
What do you mean? Save me from myself at this point.
Okay, look, perform has two very distinct meanings. Actually, there are 13 current meanings for perform in the OED and another 8 obsolete ones.
Of course there are.
Okay, but there are two that are relevant to what we're talking about. The first is to execute or accomplish a task, to do an action, to complete a piece of work, to fulfill a duty. It often requires specialized skills. So, for example, a surgeon will perform an operation, or a person can perform well under pressure. So, there's nothing inauthentic about that meaning of the word perform in this sense. In fact, it is essentially authentic. But the second meaning is about putting on a show and entertaining an audience, acting, singing, dancing. And I think that's the sense where the concept of inauthenticity comes in, performing as pretending to be other. And honestly, it
Mm.
does not help that one of the major academic thinkers who came up with the foundational work in the performative self concept, he actually used theater as a metaphor and talked about performance in that sense, but I think it's become kind of literal, and then maybe over time, the idea of performative self, you can read the idea of inauthenticity into it.
God, my head hurts. I think you're right, and I personally have to split hairs on this one. It's all in the definition. If you present differently to different groups of people, are you different? I guess it depends if your actions are tied to your values. Then it's still authentic. I think in our modern world, we can lose sight of what's important when we feel the need to perform to so many different audiences that we've never had access to before, especially since it's often the case that no one is really paying attention anyway because they're just all waiting for their turn to perform. Ay, ay. Why did I agree to this topic? I might end up with an existential crisis of my own here. Have I been a faker this whole time? That's the question I'm asking.
Okay, 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 okay. I don't think this means you're a faker. I didn't say showing up differently means you're inauthentic. Pay attention.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. I am too focused on performing now. Is it my turn yet?
Bye. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. And let's circle back to, what we're all about, which is money, because money is one of the most powerful stages on which identity gets performed. See how cleverly I brought that around?
A genuine master.
Okay. Look, economists used to assume that people mainly spent money to maximize utility, that it was reasonable and rational and all that kind of stuff. And modern behavioral science shows that spending also communicates social information. So people often use money to signal all kinds of things. from success to belonging to status to taste, whatever it is we want to project to a particular group. Remember what William James said: as many social selves as there are distinct groups of persons about whose opinions we care. And the way our society is now, an awful lot of those selves are tempted to use money to impress these many different groups. One of the things that's emerging in the research is that a lot of financial decisions that look irrational on the surface start to make sense when you see that what they really are is attempts to manage our social identity.
But what I heard from that is we should just not care what other people think of us. Okay. All right. I see where you're going with this. That makes me think about how often today we feel compelled to turn to conspicuous consumption to project status, right? Like
Yep.
the fancy car, the latest tech, the expensive wedding, or just the staged engagement photos. I mean, no, when you are dressed up like you're going to see the queen, it was not a surprise. And no, I don't want to see the video.
Oddly specific.
Yeah, I don't want to get into it. Okay, sorry. Back to the topic at hand. What else projects status? Um, the big house, feeling pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle creep, clubs, vacations, high-end restaurants, hobbies, all of that.
Not to mention, how do we finance it? So, spending money we don't have to buy things we don't need or even really want to impress people who frankly don't care.
I feel like that's your favorite line. But I gotta ask, if buying stuff is what it takes to impress your friends or colleagues or whoever is in your circle of people you care, like, why? I mean, is that why you want to be accepted? Is that who you want to be accepted by? Because seriously, I would never do that.
Haven't you ever done it? Acquired particular things to make a deliberate impression? Because I admit it, I have. And I've done a lot of thinking about why.
Um, I think for me, I realized very early that I was never going to fit in by being like the others. And as a teenager, of course, I wanted to be popular. Who didn't? But remember my lollipop story and how that turned out? By the time I hit high school, I was so dejected by my experiences in elementary school that I made a decision to just be who I was. Not to try to fit in anymore or be what others wanted me to be or thought they wanted me to be. I was done with all that shit. It ultimately just didn't improve my life or make me better or made me happy. And so ultimately I tried to find my own tribe and honestly to hell with everybody else. But wait, you said you had? Spill the beans, lady.
Nothing huge or major, but mostly just image things, right? But it can be really pricey. You know,
Yeah.
it's the idea that you only have one chance to make a first impression, right? So, okay, I am a small, like 5 feet tall, small woman. It's really hard for me to get noticed in a room, let alone to control a room. And remember, I spent a lot of time in my early career walking into rooms full of men, and damn right, I had to perform. And I mean, remember our student led conferences? I always wore those bright suits so that you and the rest of the team could always find me. So yeah, I've absolutely bought clothes to make a deliberate impression. I've already talked about my bitch suit, but I will say that I had no illusions about it. I was very aware that it was a performance thing long before I'd ever heard of the performative self.
Yeah, I remember when you made speeches, we had to get you a stepping stool.
Uh,
Now, okay, I think clothes can be a funny topic. I've always dressed for me, but I loved fashion, right? Like, remember I used to design and make my own clothes. Back in the days, I thought I'd be a fashion designer. But did I appreciate when other people appreciated me? Well, yes. And I love to make an impression, but that was the me that needed to be different. Hmm. Maybe that is my version of the performative self. But I'm thinking of how this ties to our discussion about shame. I know that's what led you into this topic.
Yeah, because they're closely related. They're not exclusively, but closely. So remember that shame is fundamentally concerned with how we appear in the eyes of others and ourselves, and it reins us in. The performative self is also concerned about how we appear in the eyes of others. It's about demonstrating who we are to particular groups to manage our image. But it doesn't have to involve shame at all, although it can, and it often does. But often, maybe even most of the time, our performative self is just fine. Thank you very much. We can show up as, concerned parents, thoughtful leaders, constant, reliable employees, loyal friends, loving partners, all of that. We can show up authentically and there's no shame involved. But then other times, you know,
These aren't questions really where shame plays a role in how we show up. I wonder if the questions we ask ourselves are different.
like,
Well, I wonder if when shame becomes involved, the performative self is asking questions like, do I have the right things? Am I being seen in the right places? Do I look successful? Am I falling behind? So, in that sense, when shame becomes a major driver, financial behavior can become less about needs and values and more about protecting identity. And can you be performative to yourself? Like maybe my need to stand out and be seen as different, is that me trying to prove to me that I am? And then that translates to my identity and seeps into all other aspects of my life, like my spending habits?
yeah, but I think so. I really do. At least it's part of it. But honestly, I think it's our whole system that feeds the shame and the performative self. I mean, consumer capitalism basically thrives on identity instability. It makes money by making us feel insecure and insufficient. So, like, think about advertising. It doesn't just present us with something useful or enjoyable, it tells us that without this thing they are selling, you're a loser, you're lesser, you're falling behind, you're aging wrong, your lifestyle sucks, your body's unacceptable, your house is embarrassing, your children are disadvantaged, on and on and on and on. And so spending becomes part of the performance. Look, we're human, we're social creatures. We naturally adapt to social settings. And the performative self, how we are with others, that's a skill that we're built with and that we hone as we grow and mature and stuff. It's normal.
Hmm.
But the world we're in
Mm,
today, all digital, all the time, that is not normal. And instead
right.
of being called upon to demonstrate our social skills, to perform ourselves to different groups of people from time to time, it's like we have to do it all the time. We're always visible, we're always being judged by algorithms, by social comparisons, branding. It's all just kind of crazy. It's like we're always supposed to think of ourselves as a work in progress, this sort of unending renovation project. We're never good enough, we're never complete. There's always something to be improved, and therefore always something we need to buy.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Existential insecurity meets market demand. Ooh, that sounded clever. Write it down, because I'm not going to remember it later. Um, because like you mentioned, right? We're all online. We're comparing ourselves globally and continuously, and maybe that's where the work in progress feeling comes from. Right? We have endless lifestyle exposure, curated wealth displays, beauty filtering, visible status hierarchies. I mean, no wonder the research shows social comparison driving compulsive buying, financial stress, lower self esteem, anxiety, body dissatisfaction, loneliness, all that unending sadness.
Other thing that scares me is how social media and even mainstream media is actually turning social shame into entertainment and monetizing it.
Oh.
So, reality TV, viral outrage, the
Mm.
fail culture, influencer takedowns, debt shaming. um, online pylons, they all just transform shame into spectacle.
Yeah, you're so right. It's all about that emotional intensity. That's what sells. Okay, you know what? This is actually getting really kind of depressing. So, what can we do about it, Doretta?
Well, I think it's what you and I've been stressing since we started this podcast. It's really why we're doing this podcast. It's about understanding your core values and aligning your decisions so that you're living your day to day life authentically. Because when you feel fundamentally secure and sufficient, you become a lot harder to manipulate emotionally. You compare less, you status seek less, you buy less. And because let's face it, most of us buy way, way, way too much.
Okay, so let's look at some signs. You are living more from values than performance. You can enjoy things privately. You make some choices nobody ever sees. You are less devastated by the lack of recognition, or maybe you don't need it. Your identity feels continuous across contexts, like me. Um, you can disappoint audiences without collapsing psychologically, which just means you just don't care what other people think. You value experiences that cannot easily be monetized or displayed, and you don't even want that. You sometimes choose meaning over optics. Oh, and here's my favorite. You don't post pictures of your life at every moment. Doretta loves saying this. There's a whole generation of people like if you didn't take a picture or post it, it didn't happen. Um, and if you are one of those people who constantly takes pics of their food, it should only be personal use. Okay, no one needs to see it forever. And a useful question: would this still matter to me if nobody knew about it?
Such a great question. Okay, on that note, time for today's three key learnings.
Okay, number one, the performative self is really about what aspects of ourselves we curate and choose to emphasize or de emphasize in different situations. We all do this ish. I mean, okay, I'm not wholly convinced of it, but like Doretta said, semantics. And it doesn't have to mean that we are inauthentic or fake. We're social animals, and abandoning social performance isn't really possible or healthy ish. Again, I defer on what I determine as performance. I'm still on the fence about that one. What we can do, though, is work to truly understand our core values and aligning our decisions so that we're living our day to day life authentically. Then, no matter where we need to show up for family, work, friends, or in our own quiet spaces with ourselves, who we represent to the world is always grounded in what is important to us, which is how I would describe myself. Jokes all around, just different jokes.
So, second, in our society, money has become one of the most powerful stages we perform on. Economists used to think that people spent money to, what's the phrase, maximize utility or whatever, but that we make rational decisions about money. But behavioral economists are
Nope.
now, nope,
Yeah, nope.
indeed. Behavioral economists are now demonstrating that money decisions aren't so rational. And behavioral scientists in general are all over the fact that people spend money to communicate social information. We use it to signal things like success and competence and belonging and status and blah, 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 all that stuff.
Yeah, and finally, digital capitalism and the constant bombardment of social media is deeply, deeply destabilizing. We said this before, fight through the noise. Ask yourself, would I still care about this if no one knew anything about it? Would I still do it? And most importantly, in our financial literacy world, would I still buy it?
Great questions for sure. Okay, that's us for today. And I hope our lovely listeners found that as fascinating as we did. So, who do you think you are? Do your performative selves overwhelm you sometimes? What are your strategies for addressing social pressure while maintaining your values? We'd love to learn from your insights and strategies. So drop us a line or 10 at notjustmoneypodcast@gmail.com.
Make sure to call me out on it. Good talk. You've been listening to Not Just Money with Doretta and Lee. Click on the show's description for links to resources related to today's conversation. Our aim is to share sources that provide objective information that can help you make informed financial decisions. Please rate and review our show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at notjustmoneypodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to be featured on the show, you can send us your questions and comments by a written email, audio file, or video file. Please include your name and city. This show is produced and edited by Lee, with original music by Leo Zhang cello and artwork by John Tu. Now for some legalese. Please note that the views expressed by our hosts and guests are theirs alone and should not be viewed as financial advice. This podcast is intended to be entertainment and educational in nature. Please seek additional professional support or information before acting on any podcast information. As always, good talk.